Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and for the never-ending amount of times, I'll be taking a look at another PS1 game, and that happens to be Expert. And no, it has nothing to do with the Sega Genesis game Expert that is spelled weirdly. Nah, this is an entirely different game, and was developed and published by Nihon Busan, and was released in 1996, and only in Japan. But it did eventually make its way out to other countries, which is kinda interesting. So here's what happened. So this game was officially released in Japan only, but it actually did manage to get released outside of Japan due to the bootleggers. But the unofficial version of the game was actually called Counter-Strike Version Expert, because the bootleggers wanted to cash in on the success of the Counter-Strike game. And since both Counter-Strike and Expert do have a very similar setting, it was not a hard change to make. Because I've heard many stories in other countries where they actually do sell a lot of PS2 games with like really weird cover arts. Like for an example, like you can get like a modded version of GTA where you get to play as like Sonic the Hedgehog or even Vegeta. So technically speaking, the game did come outside of Japan, but it was just unofficial, and of course it was called Counter-Strike. And as you can see here, it is indeed a first-person shooter, and it has the whole military and SWAT concept behind it. And in case you're wondering what the game's story is about, well, there's really not much to say, but basically, it's like Die Hard. So, if you've seen Die Hard, then you know what this game's story is about. So yeah, let's get moving on and start talking about the gameplay. So before you start a mission, you can actually select your loadout, usually being with different guns. Yeah, kinda like Call of Duty, but before that. And after you pick a class, then it takes you right to the mission, and you realize that this is a first-person shooter that looks very similar to Wolfenstein. And I say Wolfenstein more so than something like Doom, because this game has a more like first-person dungeon crawler type feel to it, much like Wolfenstein does, where Doom, as you know, has a lot of like elevators and like higher planes and, you know, some platforming stuff. So yeah, none of that is in this game. So you walk around in a maze-like building, shoot at some bad guys, collecting key cards, and sometimes you have to do some oddball stuff, like rescuing some hostages and even disabling some bombs. Now, for the most part, this game is pretty easy to play, even if it's only in Japanese, but some of that other stuff that I mentioned about, like, the hostages and, like, disarming the bombs, yeah, that stuff was a little tricky to figure out at first, but after some fidgeting around, though, you can kind of figure it out. So yeah, if you played, like, a first-person shooter from back then, in the 90s, then you pretty much know what to expect here. So let's get moving on to the game's controls, and I do think that the controls in this game are not too bad. So you move around with the D-pad only, that's to be expected from a game in 1996 for PS1, but strangely enough, I still think it feels fine with the D-pad. The X button shoots, circle changes your weapons, the square button brings up a menu screen that also shows your map and everything. Triangle is to open doors and activate other things, and then L1 and R1 allows you to strafe. And I am so glad that it does have strafing in it, because you'd be surprised how many FPSs like this do not have strafing in them. Because being able to strafe really does help out with the fact that you can only use the D-pad to move. But yeah, I do think it does feel pretty good, because for an FPS like this, like I said, there's no like higher planes or anything like that, so being able to aim in this game is pretty simple and easy to understand. But if there is one complaint I do have, although this doesn't really have to do with the controls, but I figured I'd mention it here, is that this game does have a little bit of slowdown when there is like a ton of enemies in like one giant room. But other than that, I think it does feel pretty good, and definitely does control a lot smoother than the Wolfenstein 3D port on SNES. That one is just crap. But overall, I was actually kind of surprised how well the controls were in this game. There really is not much complaints. It feels pretty good for what it is. Obviously, if you're too used to more modern FPSs where you have to like aim down your sights and such, yeah, obviously going back to this might feel a little dated. But aside from that though, if you're used to like the old school stuff like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, you'll feel just at home. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the game's graphics. And the graphics in this game are okay, nothing great, but they're okay. Now yes, it is good that this game does use some 2D sprites, which do hold up better than the 3D models at the time. And while the sprite work itself is fine, the problem I have with this game in terms of looks though is that It's just not a very pretty game to look at. Like, there's not a lot of, like, nice colors. Everything is kind of dull and not really memorable looking. I mean, there are some spots that are kind of nice looking, but overall, it's kind of a dull game. Now, I know some would argue that it fits the game because, you know, it's like a SWAT team military type of game. So, yeah, I guess it does fit the more serious tone of it. But I just don't think it's very memorable looking. Like, it doesn't look like complete shit, but I just don't think it looks really anything great. In a strange way, I kinda wish this game looked like the Windows 98 screensaver, the 3D maze. That actually would have been pretty cool. But one amusing thing I will say is that whenever you complete a stage, you usually will get a screen looking like this, and it kinda looks like the main character only has like one eye. I don't know why, I thought that was kinda funny. But yeah, not much to say else on this game in terms of its graphics, other than the fact that even the heads-up display looks very similar to the other two games I've been mentioning a lot. So now, as for the game's music, surprisingly, the music in this game is kinda awesome. Yeah, the first song that plays in the game is pretty awesome and very catchy. I really like it a hell lot. And also the song that plays in the second stage I really like too. In fact, it kinda reminds me of something out of James Bond GoldenEye. I don't know exactly how to describe the music, but basically it sounds a little bit electronic and catchy, but also does mix in some typical military type music in here, and I think it sounds really good. And during the cutscenes also does have some pretty chill music as well that I also do like. So it does have a little bit of variety, nothing super crazy though, but I do think that the music itself is actually really good and I would recommend listening to it. I was actually surprised that this game's OST was even on YouTube at all. So now, if you want to go out and buy a copy of this game, obviously if you have a way to play it, then the cheapest I've seen it for was $14.99 and the highest I've seen it for was $40. I did see a couple for $20 and $25, but for the most part, that's pretty cheap and affordable. But if you want to get that Counter-Strike Expert version or whatever, well, that one might be a little hard to find since, you know, eBay does not really like having bootlegs on their website, which I totally do understand. But I'm sure you can probably get that version through other means, though. But yeah, even if you wanted an original copy of the game, it's actually not expensive at all. So now, as for my overall thoughts on Expert, is that I actually did enjoy this game. I actually thought it was pretty good for what it was. But as much as I do like it though, it is no Wolfenstein 3D, but I do think it was a pretty solid game. It controlled pretty well, it did have some pretty cool weapons to mess with, and the level design overall I thought was pretty good. My only real complaint with the game is that it's, well, like I said, the fact that this game does have a little bit of slowdown with too many enemies on screen can be a little bit annoying, but other than that, it wasn't anything game-breaking. And it's worth mentioning that this game does have a limited continues, which is a really good thing, because this game can get a little bit tough sometimes, mostly with some of the enemies that they throw at you. So if you do really like the old school first-person shooters of, you know, the other games I've been comparing over and over again, then I think it's at least worth trying out. I do think it was pretty solid for what it was. Like I said, it may not be as great and memorable as Wolfenstein 3D or Doom, but I do think it is a pretty solid game. But as much as I would like to recommend it more so, like I said, some of the tasks that you have to do in this game are a little bit hard to figure out if you can't read Japanese. So I can see some people being frustrated at that, but of course that's not a flaw against the game, that's just a whole language barrier. But if this game did happen to get a fan translation in the near future, then I can see a lot of people trying this one out. So yes, overall I do think Expert is a pretty good game for what it is. It's not bad at all, I was pleasantly surprised. Also, it's definitely a lot better than the Sega Genesis game Expert, I'll tell you that. But before I end it here, one little fun fact that I do know about the company that made this game also made an arcade game called Crazy Climber, and Crazy Climber actually had a PS1 version called Crazy Climber 2000, and in that one, birds can literally take a shit on you. It's pretty hilarious. But with all the shit talky that we're talking about aside though, I do like this game, and with that said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.